Now we understand the root causes of aging and the underlying drivers, the hallmarks of aging. What do we do about it? How do we actually address the hallmarks of aging? And what are the levers that we now have and we now know about how to optimize our health and how to optimize for longevity and how to optimize for well-being? Because the truth is, medicine's got it all wrong. We don't need to treat disease. I never treat disease. I create health. And when you create health, disease goes away as a side effect. It's that simple. I mean, even think about COVID, for example. Why isn't COVID affecting everybody the same? An infection's a virus. You think, oh, well, you got a virus. Okay, well, it's the same for everybody. It's not. Some people don't have any symptoms. Some people end up in the hospital and some people die. It's because of their underlying health. We call it the biological terrain, the host. So how do you optimize your system, your ecosystem? I'm an ecosystem doctor. That's what I do. And I optimize with we call the matrix, this map that we use in functional medicine to determine what's in balance and out of balance. And it's really about putting in the right inputs. It's about taking out the things that are causing imbalance and adding the things that cause balance. So what is the single most important lever we have to address every aspect of our health, every disease, and every hallmark of aging? Food. Food is number 1, 2, and 3. Okay, because you cannot exercise your way out of a bad diet. You can't think your way out of a bad diet. It is the most important thing because you literally put pounds of food in your system every single day. Thousands and thousands of molecules. People say, can I take, my vitamin with this and more of that? Oh, your body is so smart. It knows what to do. It handles literally thousands and tens of thousands of compounds all the time that you're putting in your system. And so the question is, what do we eat? How do we optimize our diet? And what matters is, more than anything else in terms of health and longevity, is what you eat, how you eat, and when you eat. And we're going to go into how food is affecting all these systems. So we know one thing about longevity. The only thing that has proven over and over in animal studies to extend life by about 30% is calorie restriction. So if you cut your calories by 1/3, you could live 1/3 longer, right? You can get to 120 maybe. Now this is a study on monkeys, Kanto and Owen, identical except for their diets. One was a calorie restricted diet, Kanto, and the other was not. And one got old and sick and the other one didn't, just because of restricting calories. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I love food and I don't want to be hungry all the time and miserable and cranky. So you might live longer, but it's going to feel longer. So what we're understanding the mechanisms of calorie restriction. And so the calorie restriction science has taught us how to hack what happens during calorie restriction without restricting your calories. Now, it doesn't mean you can eat a ton of food and everything you want. It just means you don't have to starve all the time in order to live longer. So there's a whole field of understanding of what we call calorie restriction mimetics, things that mimic calorie restriction. And why is that important? It's important because when you are not eating, guess what's happening? Your body switches into the repair phase, the cleanup phase, right? The garbage collector comes at night when you're sleeping, not during the day when you're eating. So there's this phenomena called autophagy, which literally means self-eating or self-cannibalism. We literally have a system that hunts for old, degraded, damaged parts, proteins. And like Pac-Man, it engulfs them, and then it transports them to what we call a lysozyme, which is basically a bundle of really nasty enzymes that will dissolve anything, basically. And then it cleans it up, disassembles it into its component parts, amino acids, and all the basic raw materials, and then provides those raw materials for your body during the day to rebuild and renew and repair. So it's like, you demo an old barn, but then you can use all the old parts for building a new house. So this process of autophagy is so critical to aging, because if you don't give your body a chance to clean up and repair and you just eat all the time, you're going to age really fast. I mean, this is what animals do, right? I went to Admiralty Island with my daughter, which is where they have the highest concentration of grizzly bears on the planet. And we saw them fishing for all the salmon, and they would pig out on this salmon, and they wouldn't really gain weight. And then they'd go up into the mountains at the end of the summer, and they just pig out on berries, eat hundreds of pounds of berries, and they gain 500 pounds. And then what do? Well, they go to sleep. And they live off of that all winter. So they become diabetic and hypertensive and obese, and then it goes away. The problem with us is we just keep eating all winter. Right? We just keep eating all the time. And the snack industry is the worst friggin' thing that happened to humanity. Late night eating before bed, not giving yourself a chance to actually have a pause when you're not eating all the time. And we've evolved hundreds and hundreds of genes to help us manage lack, scarcity. We have so many scarcity genes. Why? Because, like I said, there was no grocery stores, there was no 7-Eleven. I mean, basically, you had to go hunt and you had to gather, and you had to find roots and berries and bark and leaves and maybe kill an animal once in a while. I mean, it was rough. And so you'd go for periods with real lack. And so the body has an inherent system for staying alive, for shutting down all the processes in the body that accelerate aging and start the cleanup and repair process and renew process. When you activate this process, you increase your stem cell production, you reduce inflammation, you increase your antioxidant enzymes, you build muscle, you lose fat, you increase your cognitive capacity, because guess what? When you're starving, you have to go hunt and gather and be sharp and find your food so you don't die. So your brain works better, your bone density increases, and you live longer. So you want to activate this process. This is a key part of understanding how all of the mechanisms that I'm going to describe to you are working in terms of extending life. So if you're just eating all the time and you're not giving yourself a break, you're not allowing this natural recycling, repair, and demolition crew to come in to get rid of all the junk, because as we age, as we live, we accumulate damage. There's literally, I don't know if it's millions, but it's like thousands and thousands, maybe millions of hits every day you're getting to your DNA. And your body has to go and repair, clean up, and so forth. And that cleanup, repair process cannot happen when you're eating all the time. So the phenomenon of autophagy has a number of ways that it's activated. And one of the key things that food does is regulate various ancient systems for regulating your health or disease or longevity. And these systems are what we call nutrient sensing pathways. And so you have systems in your body that get turned on and off to do different things. mTOR, AMPK, sirtuins. You might have heard about these things. You might have heard about metformin being used for longevity, or rapamycin, or you might have heard about resveratrol in grapes. You might have heard about all these things that help with regulating these various pathways. So calorie restriction drives autophagy, which drives improved metabolic health and improves all the anti-aging systems in your body. And it cleans up all the waste. But if you don't know how to activate these systems, then you're in trouble. And the good news is there's a lot of ways, a lot of doorways in. But the first thing we have to realize is that this process of autophagy is incredibly sensitive to what you're eating. And the things that regulate it are sugar and protein. Sugar is the problem. I went to a longevity conference at Menla, which is Robert Thurman's retreat center, with all these Tibetan doctors, and the Dalai Lama was there, and all the most extraordinary longevity scientists, Elizabeth Blackburn and Leonard Guarte, who's from MIT, who discovered sirtuins. And I'm walking with Lenny Guarte, who basically figured out that in yeast, there's a way to turn on certain genes that extend life dramatically, called sirtuins. They're one of the master regulators. There's sirtuins, mTOR, and AMPK. And I know it's a lot of medical jargon, but I'm going to explain it all to you. And I said, what is the problem, Lenny, with these sirtuins? Why do they not work properly? And he looks at me and goes, it's sugar. I'm like, oh, obviously. So we are living in a sea of sugar. As hunter-gatherers, we maybe had 22 teaspoons a year if we were lucky. If we could find a little honeycomb or some berries. You know, in Nepal, they have the honey hunters, which literally have to climb a tree 100 feet tall with a burning bush to get the honey from the bees. Now imagine if every time you wanted a cookie or ice cream, you'd have to climb a tree, 100 feet with a burning bush. You probably wouldn't eat that many cookies, right? But sugar stops autophagy. Sugar accelerates insulin signaling, and insulin signaling is what is important for building, right? Because before, if you found honey or sugar or berries, you want to put fat on. You want to accumulate as much fat as possible so that when there's scarce times, you're not going to die. So yeah, if you found a fruit tree, you'd eat as much fruit as you can. You'd eat as much berries as you can. You'd eat as much honey as you can. And what happens when you do that is you spike insulin. Insulin makes you store fat. It slows your metabolism. It makes you hungry to find more food. So you're basically using an ancient system in the body that's designed to keep you alive through scarce winters, but it's on all the time. So we've gone from 22 teaspoons a year to 22 teaspoons a day. And kids have 35 teaspoons, and the average American has 152 pounds of sugar a year, which is a pharmacologic dose of sugar. And flour is just as bad. We never had refined flour before the flour mill in the 1800s. That's when we discovered all the vitamin deficiencies like beriberi and pellagra because they were removing all the whole grains from the flour, and you just got this white flour with no nutrients in it, and people got all these vitamin deficiency diseases, and that's when we started to see increase in obesity. And the fact is that flour is worse than sugar. You might as well eat 2 slices of whole wheat bread, and that's worse for you than 2 tablespoons of sugar. So sugar is really a huge problem. And if you want to do one thing to dramatically improve your health, is cut out as much sugar and refined flours and carbohydrates as possible, because they screw up mTOR, CMPK, and their sirtuins. They impair your longevity genes. If you want to turn off your longevity genes, eat sugar. Okay? Now, what about protein? This is so confusing for people because on the one hand, you've got this incredible pathway called mTOR, which I'll describe. And mTOR is a signaling pathway that if you shut it off, it starts the autophagy process, the cleanup, the DNA repair. It fixes all the hallmarks of aging. It's really cool. But mTOR is turned on, which you don't want. If it's silenced, it's good. If it's turned on, which it's turned on by sugar primarily and also amino acids from protein, it actually accelerates aging. Now, the problem is if you don't eat protein, protein is the building blocks for everything in your body, for muscle, for all your biochemistry is regulated by proteins. All your DNA does, by the way, all your DNA does is take amino acids and string them together in different combinations to create proteins. That's it. Your DNA doesn't do anything else. So it's critically important that you need proteins for not just structural things like your muscles, but for all the messenger molecules in your body, peptides, everything. And so you need protein. So people say, well, if you're vegan, you're going to live longer or if you get rid of meat, you're going to live longer because you're going to shut down mTOR. Because when there's lack, if you're lacking protein, if you're lacking amino acids, the body's like, oh, time to go into conserve mode, to repair mode, to clean up mode, to live longer mode without food. And that's a good thing. So it's really not about stopping protein or not having protein. It's about what protein and when. If you're eating all the time, it's a problem. But you want to turn on, you want the demo crew to come and clean up and recycle everything, but then you want the construction crew to come in. And in order for the construction and repair and rebuilding of new stuff to come in, you need protein. So it's a really interesting conversation going on out there about longevity, because a lot of people are saying, don't eat protein, be a vegan, meat's bad for you. It's not true. It's way more nuanced and complicated, and you need both. You need to shut off mTOR in a cyclic way, and you need to turn on mTOR in a cyclic way to rebuild and repair. So dietary restriction works on all these 3 pathways that are the longevity pathways. Think of them as longevity switches. And they're all functioning in the mitochondria. So mTOR, AMPK, sirtuins are all regulated by sugar and amino acids, right? And so you want to have insulin signaling when you need it, but you don't want too much of it. And when I say 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy, what I'm saying is they have disturbances in their insulin signaling pathways. They make too much insulin. And that insulin is good because it's a fat storage hormone, because it helps you use the nutrients in your bloodstream. It's not bad, but it's like Goldilocks. You don't want too much, you don't want too little. So if I were to say, what is the number one longevity test you could do right now? That's the cheapest test available in every lab that almost no doctors ever look at. It's insulin. I had a young woman the other day. She was 22 years old. She struggled with her weight her whole life. Her blood sugar was perfect. But her insulin was off the charts, was 6 times normal. And so that's why she was struggling with weight. So she was someone who genetically is intolerant to carbohydrates. Now, some of us are. If you're Native American, African American, Pacific Islanders, if you're East Asian, even Asian, you're much more likely to produce more insulin in response to a given load. So I was just chatting with a friend about, for example, the folks in the Middle East. They have the highest incidence of diabetes. In America, it's 1 in 10. There, it's 1 in 4. 1 in 4 people have diabetes. Why? Because they were herding camels 100 years ago, and Bedouins, and living in the desert on very little, and all of a sudden they're wealthy and have huge amounts of food and access to things they never had access to. And it's screwing up all these pathways that are these genetically programmed pathways for conserving your health, for rebuilding and repair. So dietary restriction, or things that mimic dietary restriction, because I don't want to be restricted about anything, are pathways and doorways into activating the longevity pathways. So you want to activate them in the right way, in the right time, and do all the right things. Now, sirtuins were discovered, and this is one of the first kind of discoveries. David Sinclair and Linda Guarte at MIT discovered this in yeast, and they found that there are a lot of ways that you can activate sirtuins to do all these incredible things. So some things want to be silenced, like mTOR, but some things want to be activated, like sirtuins. And these are a group of molecules that are profoundly anti-aging. And calorie restriction activates them, exercise activates them, certain natural compounds. We heard about red wine and resveratrol being good and extending life, and that works. And so does NAD, which we'll talk about, which is a molecule that is involved in producing energy and regulating sirtuins. So you want to activate the sirtuins. You want to, when you can, as much as possible, you want to inhibit mTOR periodically. You want to inhibit CMPK. So all these things are possible given our current knowledge about how to access these different doorways. And so a lot of the therapies, and we're going to get into the specifics of what to do, but I want you to understand this framework, because this is the why and why you should care and pay attention. And basically, you have built-in longevity programming. You just have to learn how to turn it on. And that's essentially what we're doing, and that's what we're doing in this course. Now, mTOR is one of the most important things, and this regulates cancer, diabetes, longevity in so many different ways. And there are different ways to turn it on and off, but it's basically a nutrient sensing pathway. It senses sugar, amino acids. So the best way to activate it is by kind of limiting the time in which you eat, and also the quality of the food you're eating. And that's why you're hearing a lot about time-restricted eating, right? Who's heard about intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating, 5-2 diets, alternate day fasting, skipping meals, right? What's all this about? Why does it work? Why are we seeing that if people even eat the same food, but eat it within an 8-hour window, their metabolic health improves without changing what they're eating? Now, if you change what you're eating, it works even better. But essentially, your body is getting a fast every day, right? We used to call it breakfast, breaking the fast. Now we eat till we go to bed, and we wake up and we eat right away. That's a bad idea. Minimum 12 hours, that's easy. I mean, last night, I went to dinner about 6 o'clock. I had a shake at 10:30. So that was a 16-hour fast. It wasn't hard. Had a nice meal, went to bed, woke up, did a few things, had a shake. It's not hard. And when you give your body that break, that's when all these pathways are activated and all the longevity genes are activated.